She kicked me out of the house I bought, the house I paid for. I stood on the front porch in a dress I'd ironed that morning, holding a purse she had picked for me just weeks ago. Her wedding gift, she'd said. Practical. Elegant. It dangled off my wrist as I stared at the door she had just closed in my face. Behind it, I could still hear music, laughter, the sounds of her wedding reception spilling out into rooms I had painted myself. Candles flickered in the windows, $600 worth of custom votives. Guests toasted to their future. Her new husband's voice echoed through the hall. And me. I stood outside like an uninvited guest to my own life. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I just turned around, walked down the front steps, and reminded myself what she'd clearly forgotten. I never transferred the title. The next morning, I came back, with the deed in my bag, and her guests were still inside. My name is Judith. I'm 58 years old. I raised my daughter alone from the time she was 4 years old. Her father left for someone younger, thinner, louder, the kind of woman who thinks silence is weakness and motherhood is a burden. He left behind a box of unpaid bills and a fridge full of expired condiments. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. I went to work. I figured things out. I survived. I worked as a school administrator for 27 years. Every field trip, every fundraising forum, every last-minute student meltdown, those were my Tuesdays. And in between, I raised Melissa. Melissa was my son. That kind of wild, golden-haired child who danced in department store aisles and made strangers laugh. I braided her hair every morning, made Mickey Mouse pancakes every birthday, cried in silence the first time she brought home a boy who looked like her father. We didn't have much, but we had each other. That was enough. Or so I thought. I spent 2 decades working double shifts, skipping vacations and stretching dollars so she could live comfortably, so she wouldn't have to grow up counting coins before every grocery run. I wanted her to feel abundance, even if it meant I knew nothing of it myself. And when she got engaged at 26, I made one final decision, a big one. I bought her a house, not just any house, a charming 2-bedroom in a lovely neighborhood with white shutters and a lemon tree in the backyard. I used my retirement savings, the funds I'd scraped together by eating instant oatmeal for dinner and skipping birthday dinners out. It was meant to be a wedding surprise. Something to say, "You're safe now, you're set, you're loved." She cried when I handed her the keys. "Mom, you're too much," she whispered. "No one gives a house as a gift." I laughed. "You're not no one." That should have been my warning. In the months that followed, things shifted. Subtly, like furniture you barely notice has moved until you trip over it in the dark. She stopped calling as much. She planned the wedding with her fiancé's mother instead of me. She told me gently, always gently, that some things were better just between us girls, meaning her and her future mother-in-law. I was given scraps of updates, dress fittings I wasn't invited to, venues she never asked my opinion on. I was the checkbook, not the confidant. Still, I showed up. I gave. I kept giving. I nodded when she told me she wanted to replace the furniture I had just bought for the house. "It's a little, outdated, Mom," she said, wrinkling her nose. "You have great taste, but it's not really our vibe." Our vibe. The same girl who used to beg me to read her Goodnight Moon 5 times in a row now looked at my style like a flea market trinket. But I didn't push back. I didn't want to be that mother, the bitter one, the overbearing one. I told myself it was just stress, that once the wedding was over, we'd find our way back to each other. I believed that even as she stopped including me in seating charts, even when she told me I wouldn't be giving a speech. It's just that Greg's mom already has something prepared, and we don't want to overdo it. I smiled, nodded. Of course. I told myself, it's her day. Be gracious. Be invisible if you must. I didn't realize she'd take that suggestion so literally. On the night of the wedding, everything looked beautiful. The kind of event you see in magazines, twinkle lights, gold flatware, signature cocktails with puns on their names. And after the reception, we all headed back to the house. Her house, the one I paid off in full, Guests poured into the living room. The music turned low, the lights soft. People kicked off their shoes, gathered by the patio, started pouring champagne. I went into the guest room to change out of my heels, and when I returned, Melissa stood at the door, alone. She didn't smile. "Hey, Mom," she said, her voice bright but tight. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I nodded, followed her to the hallway. "I think it might be better if you headed home for the night," she said, smoothing her dress. "I just don't want the energy to get weird. Some of Greg's friends are still here. You know." I blinked. "Melissa, this is my—" She cut me off. "It's our home now, Mom, and I'm asking you to please not make a scene. You've done so much for us already. I just think it would be best." Behind her, I could see the living room still buzzing with laughter. Her new in-laws on the couch I had paid to have steam cleaned. My throw pillows, my side table, my art prints on the walls. "I'm not making a scene," I said. My voice was soft, steady. "I know," she said quickly, "and thank you, seriously. You've done so much." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just picked up my purse and walked out into the night. I stood on the curb in my wedding guest dress, cars lined up the block, music still spilling from the open windows, and something inside me shattered, but not in the way you think. It didn't break. It burned. Quiet and hot, like a flame at the bottom of my stomach. And as I walked toward the end of the street, I remembered the file in my bedroom drawer, the title deed, still in my name. And suddenly, I didn't feel powerless anymore. The motel smelled like bleach and loneliness. That's the only way I can describe it. A thin line of fluorescent light hummed above the bed, and the air conditioner wheezed every few minutes like it too. Was tired of pretending. I stood there in the center of the room for a long time before I sat down, my dress crinkled beneath me. Still zipped up, makeup still on, mascara stiff and flaky where I hadn't even cried, but wanted to. I didn't touch the remote, didn't pull back the covers, just sat there, purse still in my lap, heels still on my feet. She kicked me out, of the house I bought, of the celebration I helped pay for, of the life I built around her. For a second, I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. Maybe if I texted, she'd say it was just a misunderstanding, that she was overwhelmed, that she needed a moment and said the wrong thing. But when I pulled out my phone, there was nothing. No text, no call, no, "Are you okay?" Just silence. I scrolled through the last few messages between us. A month ago, she sent me Pinterest boards for backyard flower walls. 2 weeks ago, she'd asked me if I could add Greg's groomsmen's tie sets to my Amazon cart. She'd forgotten. 3 days ago, she texted me a picture of the centerpieces. "Didn't turn out so bad, huh?" No thank you, no love you. Just logistics. And then it hit me. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment mistake. This had been building for months, maybe longer. All the tiny cuts I ignored because I thought that's what mothers do. They shrink so their children can shine. I took off my shoes. My feet were swollen, toes pinched into unnatural shapes. I unzipped the dress, slipped it off slowly, folded it over the motel chair. I stared at myself in the mirror above the tiny sink. The lighting was harsh, unkind. My shoulders looked slumped. My arms looked older than I remembered. My face... God, my face looked tired. There was a moment I'll never forget. I touched my cheek, whispered aloud, "Who are you?" And the woman in the mirror didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep, not even for a second. I lay on the bed in the stiff sheets, listening to the ice machine outside, the buzz of passing cars, the faint thump of someone's TV through the wall. My mind replayed everything, every wedding detail, every time she brushed me off, every smile that had no real warmth behind it. And then I remembered the file, the folder tucked in the bottom drawer of my dresser at home, the one with every document, every closing cost, contractor invoice, utility transfer, the title deed. My name, spelled out in bold black ink, notarized, legal, final. I'd bought that house in cash, spent years saving, never told her until the deal was done. And even after she begged me to sign it over, I told her it would be a post-wedding gift. "Let me do this part for you," I said. "I want it to be a surprise." Well, surprise. Around 3 a.m., I sat up and opened my phone again, scrolled past the texts, opened the banking app, searched for the charges from the last 2 weeks. Wedding expenses. I saw the catering invoice, paid by me. The florist add-ons, me. The bathroom renovation she swore they'd cover, done by a contractor I'd hired, on my card. Over and over I saw my name. Not once did anyone else contribute. Not Greg, not her new in-laws, not Melissa. I was the silent backbone. The invisible scaffolding holding up her big day, but even scaffolding deserves to stand on solid ground. I opened the Notes app on my phone and began typing. No rants, no emotion, just facts, itemized costs, dates, names, times, a full breakdown of every contribution I had made. It took 2 hours. I finished around 5:15 a.m. Then I opened the group text Melissa had with me and her wedding planner. I typed a single message. "Congratulations again. By the way, I'll be coming by the house around 9 a.m. Please have your guests dressed. We need to talk before the title is finalized." I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I stared at it. Let it sit there. Simmer. The sun started to rise, pale and watery, creeping in through the thin motel curtain, and with it, a feeling I hadn't had in years began to bloom quietly in my chest. Not rage, not heartbreak, clarity. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. Done playing small, done being disposable, done writing checks and swallowing slights in the name of love. At 7:02 a.m., I got up, showered, washed off the scent of burnt candles and bad champagne, dried my hair, put on a blouse and jeans, light makeup, just enough to remind myself that I was still here, still standing. I checked out of the motel and got in my car. The house wasn't far, 15 minutes maybe, but every turn of the wheel felt like a statement. She wanted to erase me, but you can't erase the foundation. I didn't raise my daughter to become a woman who saw love as leverage, but she became one anyway, and I had allowed it, nurtured it, enabled it with my silence, until now. As I pulled into the street, I saw the house, still full. Guests' cars lined the curb, a few lights still on. Someone was on the porch smoking a cigarette in a suit. Greg's cousin, maybe. I parked across the street and turned off the engine. It was 8:48 a.m. The deed was in my bag, and I had never felt more awake. I waited until 8:59 a.m. before getting out of the car. There's a strange kind of silence in a neighborhood the morning after a big event. The air still smells like perfume and candle wax. The lawns are littered with glittering confetti and plastic cups someone swore they'd pick up later. A leftover bottle of Prosecco tipped on its side near the curb. I crossed the street slowly, heels clicking against the driveway I paid to have paved, and I knocked. Not softly, not aggressively, just firmly, like someone who knows they have every right to be there. Inside, I heard movement, dishes clinking. A door creaked, then footsteps. Melissa opened the door in a long robe, her hair messy and eyes puffy. She looked like a child again, the kind who used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare, but there was no fear in her eyes, just confusion, and something sharper, annoyance. "Mom," she said, blinking, "what are you—" I held up a hand. "I'm not here for a scene." Behind her, I saw movement. Greg stepped into the hall, shirtless, yawning. A few other people stirred in the living room. There were plates on the floor, heels kicked into corners, a half-eaten wedding cake on the counter. It looked like a party that went too late, and people who stayed too long. She stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her halfway. "Mom, seriously, what are you doing?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the file folder. Red, thin, neat. I opened it slowly and took out the deed. I didn't hand it to her, just held it. "You remember this?" I said calmly. Her face changed. I saw it, a twitch of recognition. Her lips parted slightly. You said it was mine." "No," I said. "I said it would be. After the wedding. That was the plan." "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, suddenly aware of the shifting energy inside the house behind her. "People are still here." "I know," I said. "That's why I came now. I want them to see. I want them to understand something you seem to have forgotten." She blinked rapidly. "You're being dramatic." I smiled, just slightly, the kind of smile I've given countless times to people who mistook kindness for weakness. "No," I said. "I'm being clear." I looked down at the deed, then back up at her. "This house is in my name. I never signed it over. I paid for it, maintained it, furnished it. And last night, you kicked me out of it." Her voice cracked. "You embarrassed me." "By being here?" I asked. "By breathing? Or by being a reminder of what you didn't earn?" The door creaked open wider. One of her friends stepped into the doorway, still in a bridesmaid dress and slippers. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Melissa turned, as if trying to shield me from view. I didn't let her. "I'm not here to fight," I said again, "but I am here to reclaim what's mine." "You gave it to me," she hissed under her breath. "I offered it," I said, "out of love. But love that's manipulated is no longer love. It's currency, and I'm done spending it where it's not valued." She stepped back. "You can't do this." "I already have." I handed her a single sheet of paper from the folder, a printed notice, my handwriting below it. "Effective immediately, the property remains under the legal ownership of Judith Lawson. All occupants are expected to vacate within 48 hours, unless otherwise arranged. Guests can stay," I added, "until tonight. But by morning, I expect this house cleared." "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice rising. "Mom, people are going to think you've lost your mind." "No," I said softly. "They'll think I found it." Greg stepped out behind her, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" "She's kicking us out," Melissa snapped. "I'm reclaiming my house," I corrected. "The one your wife removed me from. The one she paraded her guests through after shutting the door in my face." He looked between us, stunned. "Wait, what?" I ignored him. He wasn't the one I needed to face. "You let me stand on the porch," I said to her, "while you drank champagne in the house I paid for. You closed the door and didn't even send a text. That wasn't a mistake, Melissa. That was a choice." She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "I raised you alone, fed you when I had nothing for myself, put myself second every day of your life. But last night, you looked me in the eye and decided I didn't fit the image of your perfect evening, and you made me leave." People were watching now. From behind the living room windows, through the doorway, whispers rising behind the glass. I didn't care. "You wanted me gone," I said, "so now I am. But the house goes with me." Greg stepped forward. "Can't we talk about this?" I turned to him. "You had your chance to talk when she told me to leave. You stood there. You said nothing." He lowered his eyes. "I'm not being cruel," I added. "I'm being done." Melissa's lip trembled. "This is ridiculous. People will think you're vindictive." "No," I said. "They'll know I was quiet for too long, and now I'm just finished." I turned around, walked down the steps. I didn't look back. I heard the door close behind me, not slammed, just quietly shut, like they still didn't quite believe I meant it. But I did. I got in my car, placed the file folder on the passenger seat, and exhaled. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt present. And that was just the beginning. The drive home was quiet. No music, no radio, just the steady hum of the tires rolling over asphalt and the occasional tap of my turn signal. I don't remember passing the gas station or the corner coffee shop I used to take Melissa to after her dance recitals. I drove past our memories like they were street signs, familiar but no longer something I needed to stop for. When I pulled into my driveway, the roses I planted last spring were blooming, bright pink, lush, defiant. I didn't smile, I just stared at them, this wild burst of beauty that thrived even when neglected. Maybe that's what I was too, something that managed to grow anyway, despite everything. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and lemon cleaner. I'd scrubbed it the day before the wedding in anticipation of guests who would never come here. I sat down at the kitchen table, peeled off my jacket, and reached into my purse for the file again. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat there and listened. The fridge made its low, humming sound. A bird chirped outside the window. A car door closed a few houses down. Silence. Not heavy, not hollow, just honest. It was in that silence I realized something that stopped me cold. I had lived most of my adult life preparing for everyone else's needs, meals they liked, clothes they wanted, schedules that suited them. I had learned how to make room for people, but never how to make room for myself. Even that house I gave Melissa, it wasn't a gift. Not really, it was an apology. An apology for all the things I thought I lacked as a mother. The years I couldn't afford new shoes, the birthdays where she only got one present, the nights I came home too tired to ask about her day. I poured my guilt into granite countertops and a clawfoot tub. I thought if I gave her more now, it would erase all the less from then. But it didn't. It only taught her to expect more and give less. I stood up and walked to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand, pulled out another file, this one older. Inside were papers from my divorce, letters from her father, old photos. One of them showed us at a county fair, Melissa on my shoulders laughing. I was sunburned and exhausted, but smiling like nothing else mattered, and maybe, at the time, nothing else did. I traced her face with my finger. That version of her still lived in me somewhere, tucked between the scar tissue and the love. But the woman she'd become? She didn't ask me to leave a party. She pushed me out of her life with a smile. I went to the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the sink watching the sunlight stretch across my porch. I didn't cry. I'd done that enough. Instead, I opened the file again and pulled out every receipt. Venue, cake, florist, house painters, custom rugs. The list went on. I stacked them in neat piles and ran my fingers across the total. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about acknowledgement, about being seen, about being honored for showing up when no one else did. I had shown up every day of Melissa's life, through fevers and heartbreaks, broken friendships and college move-ins. When her father forgot to call on her birthday, I baked 2 cakes. When she crashed her car senior year, I lied to insurance and said I was the driver. I cleaned her messes, covered her mistakes, clapped the loudest from the back row, and when it came time for her to show up for me just once, she didn't even offer a chair. That was what broke me. Not the wedding, not the house, the silence, the studied, deliberate exclusion, the way she smiled like I was a guest in a home I had built from the ground up. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was humiliated. And somehow, in that humiliation, I found clarity. Because once the shame burns away, what's left is truth. And the truth was this. I was never just the supporting role. I was the foundation, the blueprint, the concrete beneath her feet. And if she thought she could build a life by erasing me, she clearly forgot who held the keys. That evening, I posted one photo on Facebook. Just one. It was the check I had written for the house. Amount visible, signature clear, account number blurred out. No caption, no hashtags, no angry monologue, just proof. Proof of what had been given. Proof of what had been taken for granted. Within an hour, the comments started pouring in. Old friends, colleagues, 2 of Melissa's former teachers. Some didn't understand. Some were outraged. But most understood exactly what I was saying without saying a word. One comment stopped me in my tracks. It read, "This broke my heart, Judith. I've never related to something more. Thank you for reminding us we don't have to stay quiet forever." I read it 3 times, and then I turned off my phone. Not out of anger, not out of spite, out of peace. Let them rage in group chats. Let them piece together explanations, text each other theories, spin it however they want. I wasn't replying. I wasn't defending. I was reclaiming something I hadn't known I'd lost until the moment she shut the door on me. My place, not just in that house, in my own life. It's funny how silence, once feared, can become a sanctuary. The next morning, I woke to birdsong and lights spilling through the curtains. No pinging notifications, no anxious messages, no apologies waiting in my inbox. Just stillness. And for once, it didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like relief. I brewed coffee the way I liked it. Strong, black, no sugar. Sat on the porch in my robe, legs tucked beneath me, and watched the sprinkler skip across the grass. This wasn't the life I imagined at 58. It wasn't the family closeness I had envisioned, but it was quiet. It was mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing someone else's love just to feel worthy of my own space. I glanced at my phone but didn't touch it. I knew what I'd find. Accusations, justifications, carefully worded attempts to make me the villain in a story where I had paid for the entire production. I let it be. Let them talk. Let them spin it, however they needed to. I had no desire to be understood by people who only saw me as useful when I was silent. Instead, I got dressed. Not for anyone else, just for me. A cotton blouse I hadn't worn in months, comfortable jeans, no Spanx, no lipstick, just skin and breath, and a woman who had grown too tired of begging to be visible. I started cleaning the house, not out of obligation, but out of ritual. Wiped the counters, dusted shelves, watered the spider plant in the corner that had somehow survived on neglect and filtered light, like me. And when I reached the living room wall, I stopped. There they were, the framed photos, lined up like a museum exhibit. Melissa's graduation, her first dance recital, a sun-faded photo of the two of us building a sandcastle in Myrtle Beach when she was 6. My smile in everyone was wide, proud, but hers. Her smile had changed. Over the years, it had become less about joy and more about performance. The girl who used to cling to my hand now stood posed, chin lifted, polished, distant. A woman who had learned that love was something to be displayed, not felt. I stood there for a moment, then walked to the linen closet, pulled out an old towel. One by one, I took the frames down, wrapped them carefully, and placed them in a cardboard box, not to throw away, but to archive, to separate memory from identity. I labeled the box in black marker, memories, not obligations, and I set it on the closet shelf. The wall looked bare afterward, but honest, like it was waiting for something new. Later that afternoon, I drove to the market. No list, no plan, just a quiet urge to fill the house with something that made me feel seen. I wandered the aisles slowly, choosing whatever caught my eye. Fresh basil, cherry tomatoes, a wedge of Parmesan, a bottle of red wine that cost more than I usually allowed myself to spend. For dessert, I grabbed a single slice of lemon cake from the bakery case. Not raspberry, not vanilla, not her favorite, mine. That evening, I cooked just for me. A simple dish, lemon butter pasta with roasted garlic and blistered tomatoes. I lit a candle at the table, folded a cloth napkin, poured myself a glass of wine, played soft jazz on the kitchen speaker, and I sat at the head of the table, alone, but not lonely. I took the first bite slowly, letting the flavors melt across my tongue, and I smiled, not for anyone watching, not for approval, just for me. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a text from Melissa. "Mom, can we please talk? You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted the night to feel elevated." Elevated, the same word she used when she rejected the living room furniture, when she said my outfit didn't match the bridesmaid's palette, when she told me the guests wouldn't understand our dynamic. It was always about optics with her. And the ironic part? I had spent my entire life making sure she could rise. And now that she had, she couldn't bear to be seen beside the woman who built her staircase. I locked the phone and turned it face down. I would not spend another second twisting myself into forgiveness just to keep someone else comfortable, not when they had never once done the same for me. After dinner, I washed the dishes slowly. Let the warm water soothe the ache in my hands, the same hands that once braided her hair, packed her lunches, clapped the loudest from the back of every auditorium. These hands didn't deserve silence. They deserved gratitude. I looked down at them and whispered, "Thank you." And then I dried them off and placed the wine glass back in the cabinet. That night, I slept with the window open. No worries about being needed. No alarm set for someone else's schedule. Just air and stillness and a woman learning the shape of her own breath again. I dreamed of nothing. And when I woke up, I felt full. Not because someone praised me, not because someone needed me, because I had fed myself, seen myself, and remembered who I was before anyone told me I was too much or not enough. The invitation list started with silence, not guilt, not expectation, just a quiet moment where I sat with a yellow notepad and asked myself a question I hadn't considered in years. Who do I want at my table? Not who needs me, not who I owe, not who would look good in photos, who sees me. The first name I wrote was Claire. We used to work the night shift together back when I was still at the district office, before her second divorce and before my knees started acting up in the cold. She once brought me soup in a thermos when I had bronchitis, but couldn't afford to call in sick. Then Mr. Henderson, my neighbor, 2 houses down. He's been shoveling my driveway for 5 winters now, never asks for anything in return. Once brought me a pie on Thanksgiving with a note that said, "You shouldn't eat alone unless you want to." Then Dana, the girl at the bookstore. She always asks how I'm doing and actually waits for the answer. We've never had coffee, never spent more than 5 minutes talking, but she remembers my name. That's more than I can say for most people who claim to love me. Janet was last, a nurse from when I slipped and broke my wrist last spring. She stayed after her shift to make sure I had someone to talk to during recovery. "I can tell you're the kind who never lets herself be the patient," she said. She wasn't wrong. I sat back after writing those names. 4 people, none of them related to me by blood. All of them had shown me something Melissa hadn't in years: respect. I folded the notepad closed, took a breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a plan forming. Not revenge, not retaliation, just something mine. The next few days passed quietly, but not passively. I went to the market again, this time with purpose. Carried a woven basket instead of a cart. Chose every ingredient by hand: ripe heirloom tomatoes, fresh basil, garlic so sharp it clung to my fingertips, a sourdough loaf from the bakery counter, a block of pecorino romano. I skipped the frozen aisle, skipped the processed snacks, no catering trays, no finger foods meant to impress. I was feeding people who already saw my value. At home, I dug through the closet and pulled out a blue tablecloth I hadn't used in years, sunflowers embroidered along the edge. I remember buying it when Melissa was little, thinking it would be too cheerful for a dinner table. Now it felt like exactly the right kind of joy. I cleaned the house again, not like I was preparing to be judged, but like I was making space. Space for warmth, for laughter, for something better than duty. The morning of the dinner, I woke early, put music on Norah Jones, Stevie Nicks, a little Van Morrison, not because anyone asked, just because it made the kitchen feel alive. I chopped, roasted, stirred. I sang to myself while slicing onions. Lit candles, not the overpriced votives from Melissa's wedding, just the ones I had on hand: lavender, vanilla. A tiny citronella I'd forgotten was tucked behind the emergency flashlight. I pulled out mismatched plates from the cupboard, ones with little chips in the corners or faint floral patterns, faded from years of dishwashing. Not perfect, not coordinated, but real. And then I set the table. I didn't seat anyone at the head. That was for me. The knock came just before 6, Claire holding a bottle of wine and smiling like she already knew she'd be fed well. "You look incredible, Judith," she said, hugging me tight. I did. Linen blouse, loose hair, no shapewear, no hairspray, no panicked gloss. Just clean skin, bright eyes, and a body standing fully in its own space. They trickled in one by one after that. Laughter in the doorway, stories exchanged over wine, warm hugs. No performative pleasantries. Just people showing up because they wanted to. We ate in the living room, at the table that once held Melissa's homework and birthday cupcakes. But this time, the dishes weren't paper. The food wasn't kid-friendly. And the people around me weren't there because they felt they had to be. They were there because I had invited them, because I wanted them. The pasta came out perfect. Garlic rich, tomatoes caramelized, basil bright and fresh. Someone passed the bread without being asked. Someone else poured wine into my glass before I noticed it was low. We laughed about bad dates, the worst wedding speeches we'd ever heard. Someone's niece who brought her ferret to a family reunion. And I laughed too. A full, from-the-stomach, tilt-your-head-back laugh I hadn't felt in years. Not tight-lipped, not polite, real. At one point, I caught myself looking around the table. At these people, none of whom had seen my baby photos or sent me Christmas cards every year. But every one of them had looked me in the eyes tonight and seen me. This, I thought, was what families should feel like. Warm, honest, chosen. Somewhere between the second helping of pasta and the lemon bars I'd made for dessert, Claire raised her glass. "To Judith," she said, smiling across the candle-lit table, "for reminding us that you don't have to be invited to someone else's celebration when you can create your own." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting to be acknowledged. I was already known. The knock came just after noon. Not loud, not frantic, just steady, like someone who knew I was home. I was still in the kitchen, rinsing lemon bar crumbs off plates and humming a song from last night's playlist. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic and something sweeter. Peace, maybe. Or freedom. I paused. The second knock came, firmer. I dried my hands, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. Melissa. I didn't sigh, didn't brace myself. I just stood there for a moment, watching her silhouette behind the frosted glass. Same posture, same nervous shifting of her feet, her arms crossed tightly over her chest like she was hugging herself. 7 days had passed since the wedding. 7 days since she closed the door on me. 7 days of silence from my side and scrambling from hers. She'd texted, called once, left a voicemail that started with, "Can we just talk?" and ended with, "You're being dramatic, Mom." I didn't respond, because by the time a woman like me stops answering, the damage has already been done, and acknowledged silence hits louder than screaming ever could. I opened the door slowly. She looked the same, but not really. There were shadows under her eyes. Her blouse was wrinkled. Her mouth was pressed into a line she probably thought would make her look strong, but it just made her look unprepared. "Hi, Mom." I didn't say it back. I stepped aside and held the door open. She hesitated, then walked in. Her eyes scanned the room. No framed photos of her, no family portraits, no signs of the daughter I once bent my whole world around. Just a clean house, lit softly by sun and the scent of real food and fresh air. Her gaze landed on the mantel, now bare except for a vase of sunflowers and a small candle. She turned to me. "Where are the pictures?" I ignored the question. "Sit down," I said calmly. She obeyed, sinking into the armchair across from me like she didn't quite know how to behave anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because the rules had changed. I wasn't bending, I wasn't softening, and I sure as hell wasn't going to beg for clarity. There was a long pause. Then she exhaled. "I didn't come here to fight." I nodded once. "Good. She shook her head. I don't understand what happened. One minute everything was fine, and then you're canceling things, posting pictures of checks online, and telling Greg and me we have 48 hours to leave. It was humiliating. That word again. Humiliating. As if she had any idea what that truly meant. I stood, walked over to the coffee table, and set down a plain cardboard box. She looked at it. "What is this?" "Receipts," I said. "Every last one, from the past year, the down payment on your house, the catering invoices, the bar upgrades, the chair rentals, the backyard landscaping, even the robes for your bridesmaids, all paid by me." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. I reached into the box again and pulled out one more item. A letter. Her father's handwriting. I didn't hand it to her yet, just held it. "I found this the morning after your wedding," I said. "It was buried in some papers from years ago." She furrowed her brow. "What is it?" I passed it to her. She unfolded the page, read. Her face shifted, confusion, then disbelief, then pale silence. "He said I wasn't yours," she whispered. "No," I said. "He said he didn't know, that when he left he didn't want to take responsibility for you, that I could give you up if I wanted. And I didn't." She stared at the paper. "I stayed," I continued. "I stayed when he left. I stayed through the nights you screamed with ear infections, through your first heartbreak, through college rejections, through every tantrum and slam door." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know." "No," I said. "You didn't care." She looked up. "That's not fair." "It's honest." Her eyes filled, but I didn't move to comfort her, because this wasn't about pain anymore. It was about pattern, and patterns don't break just because someone cries. "You didn't forget me, Melissa," I said. "You erased me, slowly, strategically. You chipped away at the parts that didn't match the new life you were building, and when I didn't shrink fast enough, you pushed me out." She looked down. I stood, walked to the mantel, picked up one of the empty frames. "This used to hold a photo of us at your kindergarten graduation. You had marker on your dress and a missing tooth. You ran off the stage and jumped into my arms." I set the frame back down, face down. "I'm done holding on to versions of you that no longer exist." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." I nodded, and yet it did. Her lip trembled. "What do you want me to do?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I don't want anything," I said. "Not anymore." Her shoulders dropped. I gestured to the box. "Take these. Every invoice, every record, every reminder of what you chose to overlook." She reached out, hesitated, then took the box. We walked to the door together. The same door she had closed in my face 7 nights ago. She paused at the threshold, looked back at me like she was searching for softness, a sliver, a crack, anything, but I had none left to give. "You always said I was your whole world," she said quietly. "You were," I replied. "And now, finally, I'm mine." And then I closed the door. This time it stayed shut, not out of anger, but out of peace. After she left, I didn't cry. I didn't replay the conversation, didn't second-guess my words, didn't sit by the window wondering if she'd come back and say something different. I didn't need her to, because for the first time in my life, I had said everything I needed to say. There was no venom, no shouting, no revenge, only truth. And truth, as it turns out, is the most liberating thing a woman can own. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I once cut the crusts off Melissa's sandwiches and helped her color inside the lines. Now it was quiet, clean, mine. I looked around the house, no longer as a backdrop for someone else's milestones, but as a space I had built and earned, not for validation, not for love, but for living. My eyes landed on the wall where her graduation photo once hung, and I didn't feel grief. I felt space, room for something new, for something better. That evening, I opened the windows, let the cool breeze move through the house like a baptism. In the living room, I placed a small speaker and played my music. No pop hits, no wedding playlists, just the soft, haunting sounds of Nina Simone, Billie Holiday, Tracy Chapman, women whose voices carried pain and power in the same breath. And I danced, not for anyone watching, not for exercise, but because I could, barefoot on the hardwood, my body still stiff in places, still tired in others, but free. The next morning, I made a list, not a to-do list, a to-want list, things I wanted to do just for me. Go to the art museum on a weekday, try that Moroccan place downtown, buy real linen bed sheets, not the polyester ones I always settled for. Take a solo trip, maybe the coast, maybe somewhere colder. None of them were dramatic, but they were mine. Small rebellions in a life where I'd spent decades being someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's fallback. Now I was just Judith, and I was getting to know her again. That afternoon, I cleared out the garage, not for spring cleaning, for a workspace. I found an old table, some paint cans, brushes I'd forgotten I owned. I'd always loved to paint, once upon a time, before life became a series of appointments and emergencies. I used to dream in color. I wanted that again. Later, while sorting through an old box of receipts and scraps, I found something that stopped me cold. A photo. Me and Melissa. I was younger, maybe 35. She was about 8, missing both front teeth, grinning up at me with her arms wrapped around my neck. I stared at that picture for a long time. That little girl loved me. That love was real. What came after? The distance, the entitlement, the betrayal, that was hers, not mine. I tucked the photo into a drawer, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need it displayed anymore. I didn't need to perform my motherhood to feel it. She had the wedding, I had the history, and now I had a future. Around dusk, I opened my front door and sat on the porch with a glass of wine and no agenda. Just air, just sky, just the thrum of my own quiet life returning to me. No calls came, no apologies, no grand gestures, no flowers, just silence. And this time, it wasn't rejection. It was permission. To breathe, to rest, to finally choose myself. Because here's what no one tells women like me, the ones who spend their lives giving until they forget how to receive. You can leave the door open for people you love, but you don't have to leave yourself behind to keep them comfortable in your home, especially when they forget who built it. That night, I slept with the bedroom window open, cool wind brushing against my collarbone like a soft reminder. This is your life. You earned every inch of it. Live like it. It was Thursday morning when the message came, not from Melissa, not from Greg, not from one of her friends scrambling to patch what had already been leveled. This one came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Claire forwarded it to me, said it had shown up in her Facebook inbox overnight. The name was familiar, but it still made my heart skip when I read it. Diane, my niece, Melissa's cousin. We hadn't spoken much since the rehearsal dinner. She was always caught between sides, too polite to confront, too quiet to comfort. I saw her that night, 2 rows back at the ceremony, sitting next to my sister, Carol. She never looked toward the kitchen, not once, but her message said everything she hadn't. I don't know what to say. I saw where they made you sit. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was just temporary. I didn't realize until later it was deliberate. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I should have. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I needed the apology, but because for the first time in a week, someone said the quiet part out loud. They saw it, they knew, they just stayed quiet. And that hurt more than the original betrayal, because silence doesn't protect you. It protects the ones who hurt you. I typed a short reply. Thank you for saying this. That day taught me who is willing to speak for me and who isn't. I'm not angry. I'm just moving forward. I hope you are, too. I didn't send it for validation. I didn't wait for a reply. I simply closed the message and that chapter with it. I spent the rest of the morning walking through my garden. The roses had exploded overnight. Full blooms, unapologetically open. Even the vine that always refused to thrive had stretched toward the sun. I ran my fingers along the petals and smiled. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in over 15 years. I went to the bookstore, not to buy a parenting guide, not to pick up a gift card for a niece or a friend, just for me. The air inside smelled like paper and cinnamon, comfort in a scent. Dina was at the counter, her usual smile softening when she saw me. "You look rested," she said. I was. For once, I really was. I browsed slowly, let my fingertips glide over the spines of novels and cookbooks and memoirs from women who had walked through fire and lived to write about it. I picked up a book on solo travel, one on watercolor basics, a novel about a woman who left her family behind and started over in Maine. The cashier rang them up without comment. No questions. No tilted head asking, "Who's this for?" They were for me. On the way home, I stopped at a small cafe, ordered a coffee, and sat at a table by the window. No rush, no errands waiting, no one to answer to. It's strange how you forget what freedom feels like until it finds you again. That evening, I went through my closet, not to organize it, to reclaim it. I pulled out the dress I'd worn to Melissa's wedding, the mauve one with the hand-stitched seams. It still held the faint scent of catered marinara and sweat. I held it up, stared at it, then calmly folded it, placed it in a donation bag, and said goodbye to what it represented. The final thing I wore when I let someone else's comfort come before my dignity. I replaced it with something new, something I bought that afternoon, a flowy tunic in deep green. It made my eyes look brighter, my shoulders less burdened. The next morning, the doorbell rang. This time it wasn't Melissa. It was Mr. Henderson holding a small box of pastries and a note. "I saw your Facebook post," he said gently. "Just thought you might like something sweet that doesn't come with strings attached." I laughed, genuinely. He handed me the box, tipped his cap, and walked back to his porch. Inside the box, 2 almond croissants, one sugar-dusted Danish, and a note scribbled on the back of a newspaper clipping. "You deserve better, and you got it, yourself." I sat on the porch steps, took a bite, and let myself enjoy the flaky, buttery pastry with no guilt, no shame, no strings. Because for once, I wasn't feeding someone else's expectations. I was feeding myself. It came on a Sunday, fitting, I suppose, the day of rest, the day of reflection, the day she always used to call, back when she still needed grocery money or advice about how long to roast a chicken. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message. One long paragraph. No emojis, no punctuation to soften the blows. The kind you know has been drafted, deleted, rewritten 10 times before hitting send. I've been thinking about everything. I don't know why it had to get like this. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't belong. Emily said you looked uncomfortable that night, and she thought it would be better to keep things calm. I wish you had just talked to me instead of making it all so public. It didn't need to be this dramatic. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. There it was again, that word, if. Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you," but "I'm sorry if you felt hurt." Conditional remorse. Polished guilt. I read it twice, then a third time. And by the end, all I felt was confirmation. She didn't get it, not even now. She still thought the problem was the Facebook post, the cancellation calls, the uncomfortable aftermath. She still believed the wound came from my reaction, not her decision to cut me open in the first place. And that was the difference between us. She thought silence was grace, that pretending nothing happened would earn her forgiveness. But silence isn't grace, it's complicity. And I had spent too many years being complicit in my own erasure. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, because I was clear. I closed the message, sat with the quiet. let the breeze through the open window comb through the pages of the book I was reading, a novel about a woman who left her life behind and started over somewhere by the sea. I wasn't that woman. I hadn't run. I hadn't disappeared. I had stayed. In my house, in my skin, in the silence I chose. On my terms. And the most surprising part, it didn't feel lonely. It felt powerful. That afternoon, I walked into the guest room and pulled out the old photo box, the one I hadn't touched since the wedding. I flipped through the images slowly. Birthday parties, dance recitals, Christmas mornings with dollar store wrapping paper, and too much glitter. Melissa as a child, wide-eyed and soft-hearted. Me, younger, tighter around the jaw, but smiling, always smiling. I picked one photo, just one. Us, sitting in a patch of wildflowers when she was maybe 6. She's clutching my hand like it's the only thing anchoring her to the world. I'm looking down at her, mid-laugh. The wind is in her hair. There's no makeup on my face. Just joy. I framed it. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to honor the version of her that loved me without condition, the girl who hadn't yet learned to rank love by image, status, or convenience. I placed the frame on my desk, next to my journal, a worn copy of The Year of Magical Thinking, and a coffee mug that said, "I can buy my own flowers." That evening I made dinner again. Nothing elaborate. Lentil soup, fresh bread, a small dish of olives. I set the table for one. No candle this time, just the light from the kitchen window, soft and golden. I ate slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the life I had always been too busy to sit still inside. After dinner, I pulled out my journal and wrote just one line. Forgiveness doesn't always mean return. Sometimes it means release. Melissa thought I was punishing her. What she didn't understand was I had finally freed her from the pedestal she didn't want to stand on, freed her from the pressure of honoring what she couldn't understand, freed myself from waiting for a version of her that no longer existed. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no regrets, just the steady sound of wind brushing the windows and the soft, certain rhythm of a woman who was no longer anyone's shadow. The sun was just beginning to dip when the first knock came. Claire, again, punctual as always, arms full of homemade bread and a bottle of something sparkling. "You better have something worthy of this wine," she teased, and I laughed. Not politely, not nervously, just openly. Because I did. The table was already set. Blue sunflower cloth napkins folded in little fans, mismatched plates that told their own story of years lived and meals shared. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasted vegetables, thyme and lemon zest, like warmth, like effort, like home. Not the kind you beg to belong to, the kind you build. One by one they came. Mr. Henderson with a peach cobbler and a story about locking himself out in boxers and snow boots. Dina from the bookstore, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and a little poetry book tied with twine. Janet, the nurse, still in scrubs, still glowing with that calm urgency that makes women like her the quiet heroes of the world. They hugged, laughed, sat where they liked, passed wine before I asked, complimented the food like it was a 5-star spread even though I'd burned the bottom of the potatoes and forgotten the olives on the counter. No one cared. Because this wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about being present, being seen, being enough without begging. The room filled with conversation and the kind of laughter that sneaks up on you. Someone choked on a sip of wine. Someone else confessed to online dating at 70. I shared a story about getting food poisoning at Melissa's ballet recital and nearly fainting in a porta potty. No one flinched. No one judged. They just laughed. With me. For me. And somewhere between the second helping and a third refill of wine, Claire raised her glass. She looked right at me, steady, proud. "To Judith," she said, "for showing us that sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is stop apologizing for existing. Everyone clinked glasses, and for once I didn't resist the praise, didn't wave it off or change the subject. I raised my own glass, stood up, and looked at the faces around that table, not a single one tied to me by blood, but every single one had shown up, seen me, loved me in ways that didn't require guilt or sacrifice. And I said, to the mothers who gave everything and were told it still wasn't enough, to the women who were asked to sit in the kitchen after building the damn house, to the ones who were erased but never truly disappeared, this is for us. May we never sit down again unless it's at the head of our own table. The glasses clinked. Someone cheered. Someone wiped a tear. And I sat down, not in the back, not out of sight, not in exile, but in my chair, my place, my life. Melissa never called again, and I didn't need her to, because the people who mattered were already here, because forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. It meant finally locking it behind me. The next morning, I woke to birdsong again. Same breeze, same coffee, same quiet peace that didn't ask me to shrink. I stepped outside onto the porch, robe fluttering in the breeze, and looked at the roses blooming wild in the garden. I wasn't someone's backdrop anymore. I was the center of my own life, and finally, that was enough.